11 years have passed since the wild swallowed her whole, since the forest closed behind her like a secret never meant to be told. And in all that time, not a sound, not a sign, not a single trace, just the echo of her name in his chest, and the ache of something half remembered but wholly missed. He told himself she was gone, that nature had taken her back, but dreams don't lie, and neither do eyes. And when the fire came, tearing through the trees, and she emerged from the smoke, broken, burning but alive, with 2 cubs at her side, something ancient stirred a connection beyond language, beyond time, a ghost reborn in flame and memory. She looked at him, and the years collapsed, and in that moment he knew she had never truly left, and some bonds, no matter how, deeply buried, never die, they wait, they endure, and when the world burns, they rise. Each morning he rose before the sun out of habit. Not necessity brewed tea, he rarely drank. Opened the windows just enough to let in the scent of pine and damp earth, as if hoping something familiar might drift in with the breeze. His boots always rested by the door, caked in old mud. He never scraped off, as though he might need to run into the forest at any moment for a reason. He never said. A faded blanket lay folded at the foot of the bed, coarse with fur, long since sheed, and still untouched drawers in the corner remained closed, filled with things he never used but couldn't throw away in the evenings. He sat by the window, hands idle, eyes scanning the tree line, not with expectation, but with a quiet, aching ritual. Outside the world moved on. Squirrels chased through branches, birds sang without urgency, but inside him, time barely stirred. He never spoke of her, not to the neighbors, not even to himself, but sometimes just before dusk, when the wind changed direction, he would freeze, a breath caught in his throat. Heart paused, as if the forest whispered something only he could hear, and in those moments his stillness betrayed him, revealing the hollow shaped exactly like her silence. The morning she didn't come back felt wrong from the start. The forest too quiet, the air too still. He waited longer than usual, standing by the clearing where she always returned, eyes scanning the trees until dusk bled into night, and still no sign. The next day he called her name, voice cracking on the wind hands, trembling with a fear he didn't dare name. By the 3rd day, that fear had settled into his bones, heavy and cold. He searched for weeks, feet blistered, voice raw, clinging to every shadow. Like it might be her every distant sound, a hope that broke and broke again. The forest gave nothing back, just silence, endless and unfeeling. He kept moving long after reason, left driven by the absence. The way you chase a dream as it fades. The months that followed were slower, heavier. The world dulled around him. Laughter felt foreign. The smell of pine made his chest tighten, and every time he looked at the places they'd known, he saw only the space where she wasn't. He stopped speaking of her, not out of acceptance, but because the words hurt too much. People asked less and less until they stopped altogether, thinking time had healed what it hadn't. In truth, he hadn't healed. He had only grown quieter, carrying her memory like a stone in his chest, polished smooth by the years, untouched by anything else. And those seasons changed, and the forest grew back in places where it had fallen. Nothing filled the space she left behind, because some silences do not end. They simply become the shape of your life. Let me pause for just a moment. And now I want to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had someone, a person or even an animal, remember you after long silent years? A glance, a gesture, something that told you the bond was still there. If stories like this speak to your heart, make sure to follow. There's so much more ahead, and it only gets deeper. It started with smoke on the horizon, a thick, unnatural darkness rising over the trees, and then the sirens, the crackle of radios, the rush of boots across dry earth. He saw it on a small screen. At first, the fire leaping from branch to branch, a video. Someone posted of animals fleeing the blaze, and for a second, just a second, a flash of orange, a shape too familiar to be imagined. His breath caught, his chest tightened. He rewound again and again, pausing at that single frame, and something ancient stirred the ache, the longing, the unbearable hope. Could it be her? Could she still be alive after all this time? He told himself it was impossible. Memory plays tricks grief even more. But the thought lodged itself deep and didn't let go. So he went his, hands shaking as he packed his old gear muscles, resisting but heart awake for the first time in years. The forest he returned to was unrecognizable flames like monsters devouring everything. The air thick and savage rescuers called out names and numbers, but he heard only the echo of hers in his mind. And then, as if summoned by hope itself, a shape emerged from the smoke. Limping scorched her ribs, heaving, and beside her 2 tiny cubs, barely clinging to life. She moved forward, slowly, impossibly, protecting them with every broken step. He froze the world, narrowing to her eyes, even through soot and pain. They burned with the same fire that once watched him in silence. Disbelief warred with memory, fear with faith. What if she didn't remember what? If this was a cruel trick of time? But his legs moved before thought could catch up, drawn by something deeper than reason. She stumbled once, twice, then collapsed, curling her body over the cubs, shielding them even now. And as he dropped to his knees, beside her, his name lost in the wind, she opened her eyes, and in that look the years unraveled, and the silence cracked, and everything that had been lost, whispered, it might still be found. He dropped beside her knees, hitting the scorched ground hands, trembling as they hovered over her burned fur, unsure if touch would comfort or harm. The smoke stung his eyes, but not enough to blur what he saw: her body curled protectively around the cubs, her breath shallow, her flanks rising like the slow tide of something fading. He whispered her name, soft and broken. Asha. The name fell from his lips, like a secret too long kept, and something shifted. She moved, just barely, her head lifting with the weight of a world. Her eyes opened, not wide, just enough, and in that sliver of amber all the years dissolved. The fear, the distance, the silence. He saw her and she saw him. A breath caught between them, the air suspended in a quiet too fragile to break. Then she let out a sound, low, strained, not pain, not protest, but something remembered. It was the sound she made as a cub when she pressed into his hand, afraid but trusting. It was recognition. Not thunderous, not dramatic, just quiet like a flame that never went out. He didn't move, didn't speak again, didn't dare her. Gaze stayed on him, searching, almost doubting, until it didn't, until the flicker in her eyes softened and he knew she had found him. Not just his face, but the shape of him, the presence, the scent, the voice that once meant safety. And in that moment, nothing else existed. The trees could fall, the sky could burn, the world could end. But he was here, and so was she. And after all these years of silence and fire and distance, something old and unbreakable had survived, still alive, still real, still theirs. The days that followed were slow and quiet, filled with gestures, more than words he brought. Water cleaned her wounds with hands that remembered her shape. Even after all these years, she let him. Her eyes followed his movements, not with fear, but with something softer. Older, the cubs played nearby, tumbling over ash-covered ground, unaware of the weight their mother carried. She watched them, and sometimes her gaze lingered on him, not questioning, just present. And that was everything once she brushed his sleeve with her nose barely a touch, but enough to send something breaking open inside him one morning as he approached. She lifted her head before he called her name, a small thing, but it undid him. He began speaking again, not to fill silence, but to share space, memories, questions, thoughts, spoken into the air like offering. And though she never replied, she listened, always listened. And that was enough. Trust returned slowly in pieces, like leaves after winter. He laughed once, without meaning to, as one of the cubs pounced clumsily into his lap, and she didn't flinch. She only watched him, eyes calm, steady whole, when she finally stood, without help, her legs shaky, but sure. He walked beside her, not guiding, not leading, just there, step for step. No need to speak. The forest around them blackened and broken, but alive in its ruin like them. And in the hush between wind and bird song, a truth settled in his bones, not loud, not grand, but steady, that some things survive, even when the world does not memory love. Presence, and sometimes when the fire passes and the silence breaks, what's left behind is not what was lost, but what was waiting to be found. Some bonds are not broken by time or silence. They simply go quiet, waiting beneath the noise of life like roots, under ash. And when the moment comes, they rise not with thunder, but with a breath, with a glance, with the soft weight of memory returning. Real love does not need to explain itself. It just finds its way back through fire, through distance, through the years. And when it does not ask what was lost. It begins again, quietly, completely. And in that stillness, everything changes. Not with forgetting, but with remembering.